Hello, hello. Hi, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us today for the First Five Forever Libraries as Play-Based Spaces. Um, I'm hoping that you can all hear me clearly. If you can't, maybe just send something in the chat. Um, welcome. As usual, we're going to be recording the webinar today, and we'll make that available on Dropbox, but also the PL Connect um, professional development page for you to either view at a later date, or if you have some staff members that haven't been able to attend today, they can always jump on and have a look at a later date. But before I start, I really just want to acknowledge that with regard to this webinar, library staff are the experts. We can give you some ideas and suggestions, but we really want to acknowledge that you know your audience, you know the families that are coming along to your programs and sessions, you know what works. And so part of today is about sharing information with you, but I would really strongly encourage you to share information with us. So there'll be some opportunities today to in the chat function to share what you're currently doing, and it might even be you might share some things that possibly haven't worked, but what have been the lessons learned from it? Because we really want to build, I guess, a community practice of learning here and sharing that information. I'll try and not go too fast, and I'll also try and allow a bit of time, whether you want to make notes or you want to, um, you know, put some comments in there, and we'll try and respond to them as we go along. Um, and I just also wanted to flag with you that there will be two more recorded sessions. They actually won't be live webinars, but they'll be recorded, and I'll send that out to the network, letting you know when they're available for viewing. And those two will focus on ages and stages of development and how play might be supported around that. And the other one will be about making the link to home. So how do we support parents in what they're seeing in a library program or activity, and what actually happens at home? So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and pay respect to their ancestors who came before them. The location of State Library of Queensland on Kurilpa Point was historically a significant meeting, gathering and sharing place for Aboriginal people, and we proudly continue that tradition here today. So my name's Gina Crow, and I'm one of the program officers with the Young People and Families team here at State Library. And I'm actually on site today. I'm very excited about that because I have been, like a lot of you, working from home. Um, and I have lovely Michelle Swales supporting me, but she's off site. So fingers crossed we don't have any technical issues. But if there is anything, just please flag with us and we'll try and rectify that today. So we're going to look at today, like the focus is on using community literacy program resources to support play in your libraries. And we're going to look at why is play important, areas of development play promotes, things to consider when using the resources, ideas on using them in existing programs, and outreach. How do resources support outreach? So why is play important? Well, play is important because it's children's work. And I guess sometimes when we think about play, we think it's the opposite of work. But early childhood experts like to think of it as the work of children. And through play, children learn to communicate, and solve their own problems. They learn to be creative and they learn to practice new skills. And I guess making time for play, it helps lay the foundation for later learning. Play is the primary way children learn. And one of the most important things, we as adults, when we play, we need it to be fun. And so for children, it needs to be fun. And because it's fun, they're prepared to do it over and over again. And so that gives them the opportunity to practice and reinforce their learning in multiple ways. I guess play also helps them understand and make sense of their world. And I guess one of the amazing things about play is that in a lot of respects, it's simple. You know, you might observe a child playing with something, but it's actually really complex as well. All of the learning, all of the reinforcement or the development that's happening is so complex just in that one simple play experience. And I guess this leads us on to when library staff have some knowledge or understanding about play and development, this can help build a successful program. And it can also assist library staff being able to confidently deliver messages to the families that are attending. So let's look at 4 developmental areas. So in the first few years of life, more than 1 million neural connections form every second. Play builds nerve connections in the brain's pathway, which leads to the child's ability to complete more complex learning tasks. So basically, cognitive development is about brain development. It's about how children think, how they explore and figure things out. And it helps develop language and literacy skills, maths and scientific thinking, problem solving, and I guess inquiry and investigative skills. The next one we're going to look at is social development. So social development is how children learn to interact and engage with others and with their community. So it's things like that socialization skills, negotiation and managing, being able to manage conflict. That's a really important lifelong skill. Collaboration and cooperation, and understanding and adhering to rules and social norms. So social development can actually impact many other forms of a child's development and how children experience or interact with others. And a child's ability to interact in a healthy way with the people around them can impact on how they learn new words as a toddler, or being able to resist peer pressure as a teenager, or I guess, if you look long term, being able to navigate some of those challenges that we all face as adults. Emotional development is a child's ability to express, experience, and manage their emotions. It's about, self-confidence and self-esteem, happiness, resilience, persistence, empathy, impulse control, and self-regulation. And one of the things that we know about emotional development is that it's often an important indicator of success when a child starts formal schooling. Children who have poor impulse control and who lack self-regulation will often struggle because of this. And the fourth developmental area is physical development. So physical development is how children can control and coordinate their bodies. So it's things like fine and gross motor skills, so that small and large muscle. Physical confidence and coordination. Having a healthy body that can participate and succeed in physical activities, and flexibility and agility. And I guess physical development is an important part of the whole child's overall development. Being physically fit and active as a child also assists and improves their mental and emotional development. And I guess when we look at these four developmental areas, one of the wonderful things about play is that it actually helps children in all of these areas. And I guess that is why play is so important. So I've just got some things here to consider. Like before you even put out resources, before you even think about what you're going to use, we need to think about, I spoke before about play needs to be fun, but we also need to be thinking about, and you'll know the children that and the families that are attending your programs. What are the ages? What are their stages of development? What resources do you have that are going to be age appropriate or that will support them? And I guess some of the resources that have been made available through the community literacy program, the great thing about them is that they cover a wide age range. So recently we did a blog post on some of the most favourite resources that have been chosen by libraries from the community literacy program. And one of those was called a farm balance stacker. And I guess this is a good example of that because it can be used by a baby where they might just grasp it, they might mouth it. So they're just simply exploring their world, they're exploring the resources around them. Where an older child might use that, they might use it to make noises of the animal. They might use it for pretend play. They might use it to retell the story. The other thing that's really important is to look at the space. Like sometimes in libraries, we can be very limited by the space that we have available. So consider, is there room to set up different experiences? Is there enough space to have multiple resources available? Can you have a quiet area a bit further away from a noisy area? And I guess one of the other things is your area safe? Like when you consider some of the resources that you might put out, if you're going to have small pieces or smaller pieces, have you got an area that you can set that up where the babies or toddlers can't actually reach? One of the other big things is the space needs to be inviting. So, how you set the space up, how you set the resources out, needs to be inviting and appealing to the eye. Because really, what we're doing is we are sending out an invitation to the children, but also the adults there. We're inviting them to come in and to play. And I guess the other thing that I'd like you to think about is sometimes less is more. So rather than having, you know, 20 things out, sometimes it's better just to have 5 and be really intentional about what you're wanting to do from that. Um, because sometimes when children have too many choices, they can become overwhelmed and confused. So being really intentional about what you want to achieve with the resources, and that might even help guide you when you're considering what you're going to put out. And I guess the other thing to think about is, if possible, have multiple toys to avoid some of those altercations. So I've just got some photos here of some of the community literacy program resources and how I've set them out as an invitation to play. But what I'd really like is I'd love for you to jump onto the chat section now, and I'd like you to put down and share some of your ideas about what are some of the things that you think about or that you consider now before you set up the resources or before a program where families have access to them. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes um, to jump onto the chat section and put some ideas out, share some ideas. Absolutely. So we've got one comment there about resources should be safe and friendly. So safety is a paramount thing. So and that's sometimes about considering that age. So if you know that you have a majority of babies or toddlers, you're not going to put small items out. Jemima sent through that the resources have an open-ended element and sometimes can have many uses. And I so absolutely agree with that, Jemima. Um, we absolutely want them to be open-ended. We want it to be used in so many different ways. And I guess that's one of the great things about I've got the Grimm's rainbow set up photos there, and they're two different ways that they can be used. And I guess that's the great thing about often with a lot of the resources, how I set it up might be completely different to how somebody else sets it up. Oh, we've got lots of comments coming in. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. And what we'll do is we will hopefully collate a lot of this information and we'll share it at the end of the webinar. So Cunnamulla has kindly shared some photos of how they have set up their environment. And I guess this is a really nice way of just demonstrating that concept of an invitation to play. We want the space to be appealing. We want parents and carers and children to look at that and to go, oh, this is how, you know, it's an invitation. They're wanting to go and experience the different resources and to interact with their environment. I guess just on a side note, one of the things that I'd like to highlight here is setting up the space is really important, but packing away the space is also really important. So it's important that things are gathered away and they're stored cleanly but also neatly, so that you haven't just got all a jumble of blocks or a jumble of this or a jumble of that. Because one of the things that makes it difficult is when it's packed away like that, when you go to set up the space again, or when you go to create a play experience, it's much harder to do and to make it appealing if you just got everything lumped in together. Absolutely, Julie. I totally agree with you. I would love to go to Cunnamulla and have a play there. I really want to have a look at their wooden teepee that they have. It looks amazing. Okay, so most of you I know are already using resources in existing programs. So you're using the scarves, you're using the shakers, you're using props and puppets and parachutes within your programs. But I guess one of the things that I would like to just ask you to think about is think about mixing it up. Why can't you add Play-Doh and blocks? Why can't you put the dolls with the trucks? Why can't you put shakers and eggs or other things with the kinetic sand? Um, you know, these sometimes it can be challenging to step outside the box and to try different ideas or to mix different sort of play mediums together. Um, but it's okay to try new things, and sometimes it will work and sometimes it won't. But I guess one of the great things about this is when you step back and you reflect on it, if something hasn't worked, you'll think about why it didn't work, and you might even reshape your thinking to how you might do it again differently. So using resources in existing programs. So these are just some ideas that I have popped down. So collate resources that match a storytime session and use the resources to tell the story. Invite children and families to use the resources for a story response or retelling of the story. I know it's often difficult, but if you can, leave resources out at the end of the program and invite parents and children to stay and play. And I know, I'm listing these things, but I do want to highlight that I know that often how resources are used in your library will be dependent on the programs you already offer, the space that you have to work with, and your staffing and programming hours. So I just want to acknowledge that as well, that sometimes, we might throw these ideas out there, but they may not, it may not be feasible. It may be something that it just won't work. Um, the other thing that you might consider doing is creating some information cards to go with the resources, describing how they might help a child's development. And if that, you think about, oh, that's a lot of work, what I've got there is I've got a link to the PL Connect website. So if you go there and you go to First Five Forever resources, there is a suite of tip sheets with regard to using the community literacy program resources. And so that might inspire you or might inspire some ideas for discussions with your families as well. I guess the other thing that I'd like you to think about is maybe trying and incorporating some common household items with the resources that you're already using. So whether it's plastic cups, whether it is, things that are easily accessible um, in a home, so that adults actually can see how they can replicate this in their home environment, how it's transferable from the library to home. And I guess if you have the capacity, and I know some of you are already doing this, think about introducing a play session, as a part of your program. Is that something that's feasible? Is that something that you could support? What I'd love you to do now is if you can share some of the ideas of how you're actually currently using the resources in your current programs at the moment. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes maybe to share some of those ideas about what you're currently doing at the moment. And it might be that, you have a play session and you set up different experiences. It might be that, you leave things out at the end of a session, while you stick around for 10 minutes to have a chat to the families. I'm just going to share some photos here. So these are some of the photos that have been taken with regard to programming at State Library. And I guess one of the great things that I think is really important is being able to link some of the resources back to the collection. So always, if you can, trying to have some, a collection of books there that you've curated that will support the resources. So thanks, Megan. Megan has actually said that they link their play resources to a story and share these in their chatter play session and then link it to the collection. That's, I guess that's fantastic because what we're wanting to do is we're wanting, families to be taking books home with them and, singing, reading, playing, talking every day. I just want to highlight Jemima's comment there about they've made a priority to add more play-based resources to their storytime sessions instead of that craft element. And that just makes my heart sing because um, craft is a tricky thing. It's a fine line between that mass-produced craft and actually a rich art experience for the children and the families that are participating. So, outreach and resources. So, to me, outreach is the perfect opportunity to break that myth that libraries are quiet, boring places. Um, I think it's really important to use resources and to be really conscious and selective about what you're going to offer at an outreach program. We want to choose highly engaging resources that are going to appeal to both adults and children. And by doing that, by engaging children in play during outreach, you're actually engaging the carer. And I guess one of the great things about this is once you've got the child and the carer engaged, it gives you an opportunity to share information with them in a really relaxed, non threatening way. I guess the other thing to think about is when, you're doing outreach and the resources that you're going to utilize, think about the environment that you're setting up in. It might be a park, you might have limited space, you might not be lucky enough to have a van to take things into. And so sometimes you just need to keep it simple. So Lovely Whit Sundays has shared some of their photos from their outreach. Now, one of the things that I have to say is that the active tray, I love the active tray, and I don't know whether any of you have that, but it is such a versatile thing. You can put blocks in it, you can put kinetic sand, you can put Play-Doh. There's so many different ways that you can set it up. You can set a small world up in there, and it was one of my go-to things for whenever I did outreach anywhere. And these are just some old photos that I have from different outreach that I have done over the years. Now, one of the things that I said at the start of the session is that we love to hear from you. We love to hear your ideas. So if you have some amazing photos, if you have some amazing ideas for how you're utilising the resources, you know, please, we really encourage you to share them with us. Send us photos through, send us your ideas, send us your tips because we love to share those with the wider First Five Forever community. And I guess this leads us into, play in libraries. It's actually a collaborative process. So it's between library staff and it's also between the children and the carers. So talk to your work colleagues, ask for ideas, ask for support, or share your ideas. Talk to the children and carers that are coming along. And I guess this information can really help you build your program and how you might deliver it. Now, before we go, has anyone got any questions? Has anyone got any sort of burning issues that they'd like to raise or share with us today? Thank you, Tony. Storage is always an issue, isn't it? Um, some libraries are lucky enough to have vast amounts of storage area, but the majority, unfortunately, do not. Has anyone got any ideas to share? I guess sometimes it's about being selective in what you have, um, but it's a tricky thing. One of the things when I was working at a library was we would do a bit of a rotation between the branches, or we would have an off-site storage area where we might store things for a period of time, and then we would go and we would rotate it through the branches, or we would go and collect it for outreach. Oh, lots of fantastic ideas here. So what we'll do is obviously we will collate all of this information, and that will go up on Dropbox, but it'll also go up on the PL Connect resource page as well. If I've missed anything today, or you have had a burning question that hasn't been answered, please feel free to email Michelle or myself. I think, as Michelle said in the chat, we're always happy to talk to anyone. And before I go, yeah, great point, Andrea. It is very challenging to have messy play with the collection sometimes. Not all libraries have a wet or an outside area, and I guess sometimes it's about being able to weigh up how you might manage the space with actually what you want to do. All right. Well, I'm going to finish it up there. But once again, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate it. We know how busy you all are, and we know how challenging the past few months have been. Um, but hopefully, we're all seeing some light at the end of the tunnel. And I can't wait until we're able to get out and about again and maybe have some more face to face training. I'm really looking forward to that. But as I said before, I strongly encourage you stay in touch, share your ideas so that we can build that, community of learning with all of the first five community. Thanks so much, guys.